Hi there, Irene here. Welcome to a new video on the Sugary channel. I thought let's do a sewing session showing you the first steps to get into free motion quilting. Fabric is going very slow, kind of straight-ish lines. Right away starting to move in all directions. Today I won't be sewing on my Q16, but I am going to do free motion quilting on a domestic sewing machine on my Bernina 770, and I'm not going to use stitch regulation. I'm just going to use this as a needle that goes up and down like every other sewing machine to show you how to take those first steps into free motion quilting. Last time I was filming a Sunday morning sewing session, and now it's a Thursday evening sewing session, so it's completely dark already outside. And I have a big light friend over here, so I think we can manage that. I can show you what I want to show you. And yeah, let's do some quilting. So first, a few things to get you all started with the terminology. So if you're new to quilting, I already mentioned a few different things that you might not know what it is. So Q16 is a sit-down quilting machine that has stitch regulation, which means that all the stitches will be the same size. So no matter how fast or slow you're sewing. A wonderful, beautiful quilting machine, but I'm not going to use that today to mimic the setting that most quilters have. Just a normal domestic sewing machine, and you can do free motion quilting on that. So free motion quilting, what is that? Well, free motion quilting is when you have a quilt sandwich. I have made a nice pink one over here. A quilt sandwich has 3 layers, so a top layer that you've beautifully made with patchwork probably. I just have a piece of quilting cotton, and then you have a layer of batting, and then you have a backing fabric. So that's your quilting sandwich, and that to finish a quilt you need to stitch all those layers together, and you can do that with just straight stitching, or you can do it with free motion quilting. And free motion is that your needle goes up and down, and you use that to just draw on your quilt with some thread. So you move the quilt and your needle just goes up and down and makes stitches, and you steer in the direction that you want that thread to go. So that's free motion quilting. And yeah, I'm going to show you today how to take those first steps, because when I took my first steps into free motion quilting, I tried meandering, I guess, as the first pattern, because I thought that was the most basic pattern. But I'm not so sure that that is the most basic pattern to get into free motion quilting if you've never done that before. So on the Bernina 770, as I also mentioned, there is also stitch regulation. So just like on the Q16, that is this little thing. And it is a really useful tool because there is a sensor underneath, and that measures how fast your fabric is going and then adjusts the stitch length to that. So your stitches will be perfectly even when you use stitch regulation. But when you don't have stitch regulation, you can still get nice and even stitches. It just takes practice. So I am using this as a foot, but I'm not going to plug in the sensor, so I'll just have a normal open toe foot to quilt with. So that's all set up. So what do you need then? You need, of course, putting in a new needle if you're starting working on a big quilt. Thread your machine, put in a new bobbin, because it's really nice to have a full bobbin, so you're not going to run out of bobbin thread quickly when you're doing a big quilt. An important thing is to lower your feed dogs, and the feed dogs are those things that move and pull along your fabric through the sewing machine when you're sewing. but since we want to go in all directions, we don't want those feed dogs to be in the way. So if your machine has a button to lower your feed dogs, make sure to use that. On the very, very old machine, the one up there that I used also to quilt a very big quilt with the Meandering, that doesn't have the option to lower feed dogs. So what I did then was use a tiny piece of plastic sheet, a little bit thick plastic, and I cut out the hole where my needle should go, and that plastic sheet covered my feed dogs, and then I taped that down so the feed dogs did move, but they couldn't grab my fabric because the plastic sheet was in between. So maybe if you're working on an older machine that can't lower the feed dogs, maybe that's something that you could try as well. So just the thing is, the feed dogs shouldn't be able to grab your fabric because you want to move in all directions, and yeah, those feed dogs just want to pull your fabric in one direction. I guess that's the basics. Let's get to do some sewing. So I just plugged in my stitch regulator, so I can just show you quickly what that does. And as you can see, there will be a red light over here. That's the sensor, and that measures how fast my fabric is moving. So it is regulating the speed of the needle according to how fast I'm moving my fabric. So when I'm setting my stitch length a little bit bigger, because it was now quite small, so I'm setting my stitch length to 3 now. Let's do this again. So I'm not doing any regulating of speed with my foot. I just press down my foot and then it starts sewing, and when I go quicker like this, the needle will just move faster. See, that's regulating. So when I now unplug it, then I have to regulate the speed, control the speed by going faster and slower, by putting my foot down a little bit more or less. So when I move my foot or my needle very slow and I'm going faster with my fabric, then you can see my stitches are getting bigger. And when my needle is going faster, or when I move my fabric very slow, my stitches are smaller. So basically you have 2 ways to control the speed, and 4 kind of combinations. So the 2 ways to control your speed is to move your fabric faster or slower, and put your foot down more or less so that your needle goes faster or slower, up and down. Yeah, so those 2. So when your fabric is going very slow and your needle is steady pace, and then your fabric is going faster, then your stitches are going to be bigger. And when your fabric is going in a steady pace and your needle is starting to move faster, then your stitches are getting smaller. And it's kind of confusing, I guess, to explain this theoretically. So this is really something you need to get a feel of. And I think the best way to start is to make straight-ish lines. Straight-ish lines. So instead of right away starting to move in all directions and make a lot of our circular round motions like with meandering, just try going straight and see what the stitches do when you have your foot steady and move your fabric faster or slower. And well, let me show you some exercises that you can do. Okay, so let's start with some exercises, and I always like to bring up my thread before I start. There it comes. That's my bobbin thread. I hope you can see it well enough. There we go. Just zooming in a little bit. So let's put our needle in a kind of steady pace and just make a straightish line. Now I'm going back, trying to have my needle in the same pace and then moving my hands faster. So here was one way, and I try to have, you can listen to the sound that your machine makes to try to have it at the same speed, your needle. And then on the way back I moved my hands faster. So let's go back again. And then moving my hands super slow. So what should this do? I moved my hands slower. So actually this should have made my stitches smaller. Okay, just going back, moving my hands quicker again, faster. Oh. There we go. So you can see that on this way I try to move my hands super slow and the stitches are smaller. And here I moved my fabric faster again and the stitches are getting bigger. So now let's see if I'm going to try to move my hands at a steady pace and then change the speed of the needle. So one steady pace this way and then faster pace that way. So I try to have my fabric moving at the same pace. And here you see that when I'm moving my needle faster, then my stitches get smaller. So what will happen if my needle is moving slower? Then the stitches should be bigger. And so there are two variables that you can use and that you need to learn to manage to get the stitch length that you like. So here you can see indeed the stitches are getting bigger. Yeah, so I think it's really useful to start out making straightish lines and practicing and seeing what's happening. So I am going to just move up and down and then trying to find a stitch length that I like and see if I can maintain that for a few lines. Okay, so a few lines quilted. Let's see how we did there. I think it looks pretty nice. You can see every now and then I changed my pace or moved my foot a little bit, and then I started making smaller stitches. But overall, I think it's getting quite okay. And this is just something that you can practice. And when it's kind of feeling wobbly with your foot, maybe you need to find a different position or angle of your knee to place your foot really relaxed on your foot pedal. And also your hands. So I am not using gloves right now, but when you're using quilting gloves. So here are some quilting gloves, and this makes it much easier to maneuver your fabric because there's a lot more friction between your fingers and the fabric. So that can help. And yeah, I would suggest when you're first getting into free motion quilting, just make a test piece like this and just try to do some stitching. So these are kind of straight-ish lines. Now what you could do is try to make some wavy lines and see if you can get some consistency in that. So trying to just make wavy lines and see if I can get some consistency in while making those corners. So just focusing on getting kind of consistent stitches. Not that that is the end goal though. I mean, if you have stitches that are not completely consistent, you can definitely go ahead and quilt your quilt. But it's just a nice practice and something you can look at and see how you're doing, and something you need to get a feel for. If you want to take that practice to the next level, you could go ahead and mark some lines with something like a Hera marker, or yeah, with a pen that is washable from your fabrics, or if you're using a test piece, just use a pencil or something like that. You could make lines, and then let me just do that. So this is a Hera marker that just makes a crease in your fabric, so it doesn't use ink or anything, but it's a lovely tool. So now we have lines, and now you could use that as guides to help you practice. So maybe we want to go from one side to the other and try to make kind of consistency in the space between those lines. So kind of follow something like this. So give yourself kind of exercises to carry out. And you can stop regularly. Make sure to put your needle in a needle down position if you want to do that, to reposition your hands. I wasn't really giving a good example over here, but every time you want to reposition your hands, you can just stop, reposition, and go ahead. Kind of went okay. You can see that the lines that I marked were here and then it stopped, so this was just by eyeballing it. Not so super consistent. But that only means that there is room for improvement and that there is a possibility to learn stuff. So I think that's just a good thing. So yeah, this is a kind of wavy line that you could practice, or you could make a kind of double, a kind of double wavy line. That's also fun to do. I think wavy lines and straight-ish lines are a good thing to practice your quilting with. For the best control of your fabric, it's always good to have your hands around your needle, not moving it all the way up like I'm doing. Giving a bad example. Yeah, so fun things to practice. It's not always going that smooth, but it's fun to practice this. And if you want to start meandering, if you think, well, I'm ready for something more, then I think meandering is fun to learn. So if you're ready for something more and you do want to start meandering and you think I've practiced enough, that's fine. Meandering is fun, I think. What it is that you're kind of making these trying to make random-ish motions, making these wobbly, soft shapes. I don't really know how to explain it in words. And what you can see right away is that my stitches are way more inconsistent than when I was practicing wavy or straight lines. That is because I'm thinking about a lot more than just making those stitches. So I'm trying to plan ahead, where do I need to go? I don't want to cross the lines and then, ooh, now I need to take a go around the corner. Or so I'm thinking about a lot and focusing on a lot more than just my stitch length. So that is why I think this is kind of not the best thing to start with as a beginner. But it is, once you're doing this, it is so fun to do. It's so easy to fill a big space with this on your quilt, or even do a whole overall design with this. Oops. The thing is, with the meandering, you're not only trying to make even stitches, but you're also trying to make kind of even shapes, so that it's not that you have these kind of tiny wobbles and then big ones and then tiny ones again. So you're kind of trying to make evenly big wobbles and bobbles and shapes that go inwards and outwards. So really mixing it up. So there we have a quilted piece with meandering. So yeah, there you go. Those are some basics that you can practice to start working with free motion quilting. Make those straight lines, just experiment with moving your needle faster or changing the speed of your fabric movement. Try to make those stitches consistent. Here are some waves you can practice, trying to follow the lines that you make, and maybe give a go at meandering. I hope you're going to give free motion quilting a try. It is so much fun to do. Enjoy your quilting, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye!